The flash bulbs hit like lightning strikes. Outside the Aurora Foundation charity gala, the red carpet was a river of fame and money, a glittering artery of New York's elite flowing beneath chandeliers and camera drones. Laughter, applause, champagne flutes, the usual orchestra of excess. Every second, a new luxury car pulled up to the Grand Regency Hotel's marble entrance, releasing another celebrity or billionaire into a wall of flashing cameras. Ms. Whitmore, over here, show us the dress. Senator Grant, one photo for Bloomberg. The crowd roared for them, their approval echoing against glass and steel. Then came the car that changed everything. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided to a stop, engine humming low like a warning note in an orchestra that didn't yet know it was about to collapse. The chauffeur stepped out and opened the door with mechanical precision, and out stepped David Langston. He wasn't dressed to impress. He was dressed like a man who didn't need to. Black tuxedo, subtle watch, no flashy jewelry. His posture was quiet authority, shoulders back, eyes calm, the kind of stillness that made movement around him seem exaggerated. But the red carpet wasn't ready for him. A reporter blinked, lowering his camera. Who's that?" A woman in a sequin gown whispered to her husband. "I think he's part of security detail." Another laughed. Maybe the driver got lost. The laughter spread like perfume, invisible, poisonous, effortless. At the entrance, a hostess in a shimmering gold gown checked her clipboard with the nervous precision of someone who'd rather die than make a mistake in front of billionaires. She saw David approach and pasted on a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sir," she said with a sweet venom, "the service entrance is around back." The words hit the air like a slap. Cameras turned. A few people gasped softly. Others smirked. A small circle of guests began filming discreetly, sensing scandal. David paused. Not a flinch. Not a blink. He looked at her, then at the glittering crowd, watching him like he'd wandered into the wrong world. The city lights caught the edge of his cufflink, subtle, engraved with LGH, the initials that could buy and sell half the company sponsoring this event. He spoke softly, his voice calm but weighted with something that made even nearby reporters lean in. "I believe," he said, "my name is on the sponsor list." The hostess gave a quick, uncomfortable laugh. "Oh, I'm sure it's not necessary, sir, but this area is for—" "Check the top," David interrupted. Not loud, just firm enough that every syllable carried. Her perfectly manicured fingers trembled slightly as she scanned the sheet. Then her face changed. The color drained, as if someone had pulled the plug on her confidence. There was, printed in bold letters above every other name, "Presenting sponsor, Langston Global Holdings." Her clipboard slipped slightly in her hands. I apologize, Mr. Langston," she stammered. "There wasn't," he said quietly. "You've just reminded me why I funded this event in the first place." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. A photographer lowered his camera. And yet, amid the discomfort, a few people still chuckled, the kind who'd never admit to mockery but couldn't resist the taste of superiority. A man in a silver tux leaned toward his date. "These new money types," he whispered. "They always think throwing cash around gets them invited." David heard him. Of course he did. But he only smiled, a calm, measured smile that didn't belong to someone hurt. It belonged to someone taking notes. He adjusted his cufflinks, gave a brief nod to the hostess, and walked forward to the marble archway. Inside, cameras still clicked. The moment had already been captured. The tension, the arrogance, the insult. Within minutes, the clips would hit social media. The caption would read, "Unknown guest mistaken for staff at Elite NYC Gala." What they didn't know was that the unknown guest owned the very companies underwriting tonight's event. The ballroom was a cathedral of gold and glass. Crystal chandeliers hung like galaxies overhead, reflecting light across walls lined with portraits of philanthropists pretending to care. Waiters moved like choreographed ghosts. Silver trays balanced with military precision. As David entered, the murmurs followed him like a rumor spreading through a royal court. People turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. "Is that the guy from the carpet?" "Yeah. Heard. He got told to use the back door." "Seriously?" That's brutal. He walked through them like mist, untouched, unreadable, every step measured. He could feel the weight of their eyes, the smirks half hidden behind wine glasses. He'd seen this before, wealth that mistakes itself for class. At the far end of the room, a massive banner stretched across the stage. Aurora Foundation Gala, presented by the Pierce Group, not Langston Global, not even mentioned. David paused, gaze narrowing ever so slightly. The air around him changed temperature. Moments later, his assistant Tara appeared at his side, holding a tablet. She was sharp, composed, with eyes that burned hotter than the chandelier light. "They remove your name from every banner," she whispered. "The programs, the website, even the donation plaque. It's all been replaced with Pierce's branding." David nodded once, his expression unreadable. "Expected." "Expected?" she asked quietly. "You knew they'd try this?" "I hoped they wouldn't," he said. But arrogance rarely resists temptation. Across the ballroom, Elliot Pierce, the event's host, billionaire venture capitalist, face of the Aurora Foundation, held court surrounded by journalists. He was everything the tabloids loved: tall, charming, self-made, and casually cruel when the cameras weren't rolling. Pierce spotted David from across the room and smirked. "Well, well," he muttered to his companions. "Look who finally decided to buy himself a ticket." Laughter rippled through his circle. David met his gaze briefly, not with confrontation, but with the calm of someone holding a thunderstorm behind his eyes. He raised his champagne glass, slightly in greeting. It wasn't a toast. It was a warning. Pierce hesitated. Something in that quiet gesture made him look away first. The evening carried on, speeches, auctions, photo ops, all surface sparkle and hidden poison. But the tension lingered, invisible to everyone except David and Tara. "You could leave," she whispered as the lights dimmed for the next performance. "Walk out and let them have their little show." David smiled faintly. "Oh, I will," he said, "but not until they've seen what their mockery costs." The orchestra struck a triumphant chord, chandeliers blazing brighter than ever. Cameras focused on the stage where Elliot Pierce prepared to deliver his welcome speech. And in the back of the room, leaning against a marble pillar, David Langston quietly checked his phone. His thumb hovered over one message, a single command that could turn applause into silence. He didn't send it yet. He watched. He waited, because he knew one simple truth that every arrogant room eventually learns the hard way. Power doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, gets mistaken for the help, and then rewrites the guest list. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to support the channel. The ballroom glittered like a cathedral built for vanity. Every inch of it gleamed with proof that the world's richest people knew how to congratulate themselves. Gold-trimmed table setting imported orchids, a string quartet softly bowing through their rehearsed grace notes, all of it meant to impress, to remind anyone watching that they didn't just have money, they had taste. David Langston walked through it, as if he were visiting a museum of human pretense. Every table bore the name of a sponsor: banking conglomerates, venture funds, fashion empires, each vying for visibility under the glowing chandeliers. His company's name should have been on every single one of them, yet the placard said otherwise. Pierce Group, Westbridge Capital, Meridian Holdings, each one subsidiaries of Langston Global Holdings, each one quietly owned by him. It wasn't rage that moved through him as he looked around. It was something deeper, that quiet ache born of long familiarity. He'd been walking into rooms like this his entire adult life, rooms that smiled as they excluded him. At the center of the ballroom, a massive ice sculpture shimmered under blue light, the Aurora Foundation logo frozen in crystal. Inside the ice, tiny gold flakes caught the light like constellations. Guests posed in front of it, glasses raised, their laughter echoing off marble. At the podium, Elliot Pierce held court like a king basking in his own myth. His tuxedo sparkled slightly under the stage lights, and his voice carried that perfect blend of charm and control, the tone of a man used to shaping the room around him. "Tonight," he said grandly, "we celebrate progress, innovation, equality, and opportunity." The crowd applauded dutifully, unaware of the hypocrisy dripping from every syllable. David felt Tara approach behind him, her heels soft against the marble. She carried herself with the same restraint he did, elegance without excess, control without arrogance. "Press photos are circulating," she whispered. "The incident at the carpet is trending." He didn't look surprised. "What's the headline?" She scrolled once. "Mystery guest mistaken for staff at $10 million gala." A pause. And below it, one of the reporters identified you. David exhaled slowly. Let them talk. The world's already watching. He looked toward the stage again, where Elliot was basking in the spotlight. Every word rehearsed to sound generous while tasting like self-congratulation. "For too long," Elliot declared, "the barriers to success in technology have been financial, educational, and social. Tonight, we're breaking those barriers down together." Polite applause. The orchestra swelled beneath him. David could almost laugh. Elliot was speaking about equality while erasing the very man whose money built the stage he stood on 5 years earlier. The flash of memory came uninvited, a boardroom bathed in morning light. The early days of what would become Langston Global's first major partnership with Pierce Ventures. Back then, Elliot had been all warmth and flattery. "David, you're a genius," he'd said, gripping his hand with faux sincerity. "Your capital gives us wings. With your backing, we can rewrite the industry." They'd shaken hands, two men building an empire. But over time, the cracks had formed. Subtle dismissals, public omissions, quiet boardroom betrayals that grew bolder with each quarterly report. When David had suggested a diversity initiative, Elliot had laughed it off. "Let's focus on innovation, not politics." That was when David learned something crucial. The more he spoke about inclusion, the more invisible he became. So he stopped talking and started building power in silence. While Elliot was busy curating his image for magazines, David was acquiring quiet influence. One shell company, one merger, one strategic buyout at a time. By the time the Aurora Foundation Gala was announced, Elliot's empire was standing on Langston money, and he didn't even know it. Back in the present, David walked toward the balcony overlooking the city skyline. The glass walls reflected the storm of artificial light from below. Flashes from photographers, the slow spin of chandelier reflections, the restless glitter of ambition. He rested his hands on the railing, staring out at Manhattan glowing like molten gold. For a brief moment, he let himself think of home. Detroit, the small apartment where his mother once worked 2 jobs so he could attend a school that never truly welcomed him. He remembered her voice the day he got his first corporate rejection letter, back when he was still sending out resumes with optimism instead of strategy. "They can ignore you," she said softly, "but they can't erase what you know. You keep learning, son. One day, they'll need you more than you ever needed them." That day had come, and it had arrived wrapped in laughter and champagne. He took a slow breath and turned back toward the ballroom. "How long until the sponsors team sees the withdrawal notices?" he asked Tara quietly. 10 minutes, she replied. "We schedule them to trigger automatically when the live stream starts." He nodded. The calmness in his expression made her uneasy. "You really want to do this publicly?" she asked. "They'll try to spin it. They'll paint you as vindictive." "They can try," he said, "but the truth doesn't need defense. It just needs light." A waiter passed with a tray of champagne. David took a glass and walked toward the corner where the charity auction was being displayed. Silent bids scrolling across screens. Artwork, luxury watches, vacation packages. Each item boasted sponsorship from corporations he technically owned. It was almost poetic. A hall full of people congratulating themselves for generosity funded by a man they didn't respect enough to recognize. He stopped at a display near the center, a framed scholarship certificate from the Aurora Foundation. In partnership with the Pierce Group, it read. Below it, a small plaque noted that the scholarship targeted students from underprivileged backgrounds. David's jaw tightened. He recognized the program. He created it 10 years ago under the Langston Foundation, naming it after his father, a school principal who believed education could rewrite fate. Elliot had simply rebranded it, cut him out, and turned philanthropy into performance. Tara joined him, her tone low. "You could expose him tonight. Just walk up there and tell the truth." He shook his head. "Not yet." The lesson wouldn't stick. People remember shame longer than facts. A flicker of humor touched her lips. You sound just like your mother when you say things like that. He smiled faintly. She believed grace was a weapon. I'm just learning how to aim it. Across the room, Elliot was posing for photos with corporate sponsors, arm draped around a media mogul. Every laugh was too loud, every smile too rehearsed. He glanced toward David once, offering a smirk that didn't hide its condescension. That smirk sealed his fate. The orchestra swelled again as waiters dimmed the lights, signaling the evening's next segment. A word from our partners. Elliot stepped back onto the stage, microphone in hand, basking in the golden light. He gestured toward the crowd with false humility. Before we continue, I want to thank the sponsors who made this night possible. People like... He paused, feigning confusion. Oh, where's Mr. Langston? Our anonymous donor seems shy tonight. Laughter rippled through the audience. Some clapped. Cameras turned toward David again, hoping for a reaction. Tara whispered urgently, "They're mocking you on stage. You can end this right now." David looked at her, his voice calm but steady. "Not yet." He sipped his champagne and watched as Elliot continued his performance, unaware that the countdown to his own public humiliation had already begun. Because tonight wasn't about revenge. It was about revelation. And revelation, like justice, works best when it happens in front of an audience. The orchestra swelled, lights dimmed, and the spotlight narrowed to a single figure on stage. Elliot Pierce, golden boy of venture capital, darling of business magazines. And now, master ceremonies at an event he thought he owned. He gripped the microphone with practiced ease, basking in the soft of cameras and the applause of people who mistook arrogance for charisma. Behind him, a digital backdrop shimmered with the Aurora Foundation's logo, building equality through innovation. The irony wasn't lost on David Langston. He sat near the center of the ballroom, at a table reserved for the anonymous donor, the same man the staff had tried to send through the service entrance. His name tag had been printed hastily in small letters, placed far from the gold embossed cards of the other guests. But none of that mattered, because David wasn't listening for his name tonight. He was listening for their laughter, and it was coming. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elliot began, his voice dripping with honeyed charm, "tonight we celebrate the future of innovation. And of course, none of it would be possible without our generous benefactors." He gestured toward the glowing sponsor wall. Logos rippled across the massive screen. Westbridge Meridian, Apex Systems, Pierce Group. No mention of Langston Global Holdings. Not even a whisper. The crowd applauded politely, champagne glasses catching the light like polished lies. Then Elliot smirked. "And we mustn't forget the mysterious, anonymous donor who's been so generous this year. Whoever he is," a calculated pause, a sly grin. "We're just glad he found his way in." Laughter burst through the ballroom like static. Some guests tried to hide it behind polite smiles, but the damage was done. Cameras caught every face, every smirk, every turned head, every flash of judgment disguised as amusement. David's expression didn't change. He simply adjusted his cufflinks and met Elliot's eyes across the sea of glass and silk. Calm, controlled, dangerous. Elliot chuckled, thinking he'd won. "Don't worry," he continued. "We'll make sure the valet validates your ticket on the way out." Another ripple of laughter. Tara, sitting beside David, looked ready to stand up, her hand clenched into a fist on the tablecloth. "Say the word," she whispered. "I'll stop this. You don't deserve." He shook his head once. "They've already stopped themselves." Because just then, almost imperceptibly, the giant screen behind Elliot flickered. The glitch. At first, no one noticed. The screen flashed white, then stabilized. Elliot continued his monologue, unaware that the room's power balance was about to shift forever. In the media booth at the back of the hall, a technician frowned. The live broadcast feed, streaming the Gala to thousands online, had suddenly switched sources. His headset crackled with static, then cleared. The file running on the main projector was no longer the approved sponsorship reel. It was something else. The technician hesitated. Sir, this isn't the right file." "What do you mean?" his supervisor hissed. The feed changed automatically. I can't override it. The screen flickered again, brighter this time. The sponsors' logos disappeared. In their place, line after line of text appeared, stark and unmistakable. Effective immediately, the following corporations had withdrawn funding from the Aurora Foundation Gala. The ballroom fell silent. One by one, the names began to scroll. Meridian Holdings, Apex Systems, Nova Industries, Westbridge Capital. Each logo faded out, replaced by a simple line of text. Withdrawal authorized by Langston Global Holdings. Guests gasped. Phones came out. Journalists began recording. The soft hum of confusion grew into chaos. Elliot turned around mid-sentence, his microphone still live. What is this? David rose slowly from his chair. The noise in the room seemed to fade around him. He adjusted his jacket, took one last sip of champagne, and set the glass down with deliberate calm. Tara whispered. The trigger worked. Good, he said quietly. Now it's time they learned who they've been laughing at. The walk to the stage. David's footsteps echoed against marble as he walked toward the front of the room. The crowd parted instinctively, the same way people step aside when they sense something powerful moving toward them. Cameras followed him. Reporters whispered his name. That's him, the donor. The one they laughed at. Wait, isn't that Langston from Langston Global? By the time he reached the steps, silence had reclaimed the room. The orchestra stopped mid-note. Elliot stood frozen under the spotlight, face pale, microphone trembling slightly in his hand. Mr. Pierce, David said evenly, his voice carrying easily across the hall. You seem confused. Allow me to clarify a few things. Without waiting for permission, he took the microphone. Elliot tried to laugh it off. David, my friend, this is hardly the time. Don't, David interrupted, his tone calm but sharp as a blade. You've had your time. The audience shifted, energy tightening like a drawn bow. Behind him, the screen changed again. This time, it displayed Langston Global Holdings' logo, bold, elegant, and unmistakable. Beneath it, a line of text appeared. Parent company to Meridian Holdings, Apex Systems, and Westbridge Capital. Principal sponsors of the Aurora Foundation Gala. A collective murmur swept the room. Elliot's hand dropped to his side. His perfect composure cracked. David continued, his voice smooth, controlled, the voice of a man who'd waited years to be heard. You see, Mr. Pierce, while you were busy building your brand, I was building something else, a network of ownership that funded this event, this foundation, even this hotel. You thought I was a guest here tonight. He paused. His eyes swept the stunned audience. In reality, I'm the landlord. Gasps rippled through the room. A journalist shouted, Are you saying you own the sponsors? David nodded once. I do. And as of 5 minutes ago, none of them will fund a foundation that confuses performative charity with genuine equality. He turned slightly, glancing toward the crowd. To those who laughed when I arrived, you weren't mocking a guest. You were mocking the man signing your checks. The silence was absolute. Elliot tried to interject, voice cracking. David, this isn't how we handle disagreements. David smiled, a small, knowing smile that cut deeper than anger ever could. No, Elliot, this is how you handle control. You humiliate, you minimize, you rewrite history. I just correct the balance. He handed the microphone back gently. Your event's over. Then he turned to leave. The collapse. As David walked away, the ballroom erupted into pandemonium. Reporters flooded the aisles. Cameras flashed like gunfire. Sponsors' representatives frantically checked their phones, confirming the funding withdrawals and legal notifications sent moments earlier. Elliot's PR team rushed the stage, whispering damage control strategies. But the live stream was already viral. Twitter feeds exploded. Hashtag Langston revealed, hashtag Galagate, hashtag Power with Poise. Tara caught up to him near the exit, her voice low but charged with disbelief. That was unreal. They looked terrified. David didn't slow down. They weren't terrified, he said. They were enlightened. Terror comes next. She stared at him. You planned all of it. I gave him the rope, he said softly. They tied their own noose. As they stepped through the glass doors into the cool night, the chaos behind them sounded almost musical, voices colliding, egos shattering, careers dissolving in real time. For the first time all evening, David allowed himself to breathe. The city's wind met him like applause from a higher stage. And somewhere deep in the ballroom, Elliot Pierce's voice cracked through a microphone still live, shouting, "Cut the feed! Cut it!" But the feed had already traveled across the world. Millions were watching the man they mocked walk away into the night, composed, deliberate, victorious. The breaking point had come and gone. Now came the reckoning. The morning after the gala, Manhattan awoke to chaos. Every major network led with the same footage. The moment David Langston took the stage, calm and composed, as a room full of elites stared in silence. The clip had already hit 20 million views before sunrise. CNBC, sponsors pull out mid-gala after racially charged humiliation. Bloomberg, anonymous donor turns out to be CEO of Langston Global Holdings, and he's cleaning house. Twitter, flooded with hashtags. Hashtag Langston revealed. Hashtag Gala fallout. Hashtag own the room. In less than 12 hours, one man's silence had dismantled a $1 million event and exposed an entire ecosystem built on arrogance. The aftershock. Inside his penthouse overlooking the Hudson, David watched the morning news without a flicker of emotion. He stood by the window, sunlight painting his silhouette in gold. On the table behind him lay a thick folder of contracts, withdrawal orders, divestment notices, and legal amendments. Tara entered quietly, a tablet in her hands. "It started," she said. Pierce Group stock dropped 12% overnight. Westbridge board just held an emergency session. And she glanced at the screen. The foundation's entire donor list is panicking. David didn't move. "Good," he said softly. "Let them." He turned, his voice steady. "This wasn't just about one insult, Tara. It's about a culture that mistakes visibility for worth. They needed to feel the silence of a room when power changes sides." She studied him, unsure if she was watching triumph or melancholy. "You've made your point. Maybe it's time to let the dust settle." He smiled faintly. "Dust only settles when the storm ends. We're just in the eye. The fall of a golden boy." Across town, in a high-rise office at the Pierce Group headquarters, Elliot Pierce was fighting for his empire's life. The once flawless man looked shattered, tie loosened, eyes bloodshot, the mask of charm gone. His assistant hovered nervously as he barked into phone. "What do you mean Langston Global owns the sponsors? That's impossible." But it wasn't. Legal teams confirmed it. Shell companies, silent partners, acquisition chains stretching across continents, all leading back to David Langston. Every firm that propped up Elliot's foundation traced its capital to the man he'd mocked. "He's been underwriting your ventures for years," said a shaken investor over the speakerphone. "We only realized it when the filings updated this morning." Elliot's voice broke. "So he's cutting me off?" "Not just you," came the cold reply. "Every project associated with your name. The sponsors are withdrawing across the board. You're radioactive." Elliot dropped the phone. The glass conference table rattled. The screens behind him showed breaking news. Reporters outside his penthouse. Protesters gathering with signs that read, "Equality isn't charity," and Langston was the foundation. The media machine he once controlled had turned on him, devouring its golden boy. The call that changed everything. That afternoon, Elliot's last remaining ally, media executive Carla Donovan, called him in desperation. "Elliot, listen to me. You need to issue an apology. Go live. Admit what happened. The optics are killing us." "I won't grovel," he snapped. "It was a misunderstanding." Carla's voice turned sharp. "A misunderstanding that just wiped $50 million from your portfolio? You don't understand. He's not coming for your reputation. He's coming for your legacy." But Elliot wasn't listening. He was staring at the same footage again the moment David said, "I'm the landlord." There was something terrifying about how calm it was. No anger, no gloating. Just truth. It wasn't vengeance. It was order. The boardroom reversal. By sunset, the Pierce Group board convened an emergency meeting. Elliot stormed in, defiant, still in his tux from the night before. "This is temporary," he said. We'll rebuild, find new partners. Elliot, interrupted Chairwoman Margaret Lynn, her tone ice cold. There will be no rebuilding. The sponsors have frozen our accounts. Our biggest contracts were co-signed by Langston subsidiaries. Without his capital, we're insolvent within the quarter. Elliot's laugh cracked in his throat. You can't just replace me. I built this company. Margaret leaned forward. Correction. He built it. You borrowed his power and spat in his face. He simply took it back. The vote took 5 minutes. Unanimous. Elliot Pierce was removed as CEO. The interview. That evening, David finally broke his silence. Not through a press conference, not a statement, but a live interview with Anderson Miles, the respected anchor from Global Business Tonight. The studio lights reflected off David's black suit, his demeanor calm but magnetic. Mr. Langston, Anderson began, millions watched you dismantle one of the city's most powerful foundations in real time. Why did you do it? David paused, the kind of silence that made people lean forward. Because people mistake quiet for weakness, he said finally. They see a man walking who doesn't fit their expectation, and they forget that wealth doesn't need validation. It only needs awareness. Anderson nodded. You could have stayed anonymous. Why go public? David looked directly into the camera. Because anonymity protects the individual. Visibility protects the truth. The audience in the studio was silent. Across the world, millions watched as he continued. Power is like currency. It changes hands. But the real value comes from how it's used. I didn't pull funding out of anger. I redirected it toward people and programs that treat equality as action, not theater. Anderson smiled faintly. Some are calling this the most elegant act of corporate justice they've ever seen. David shook his head. Justice isn't elegant. It's necessary. The new beginning. Within 48 hours, the Aurora Foundation collapsed. Its board resigned, its assets frozen pending audit. But in the ashes, a new entity rose, the Langston Initiative for Equity and Innovation, backed by the same funds withdrawn from Pierce's empire. The announcement was simple, released on social media with a quiet statement. The same money, the right mission. Thousands of messages flooded in, students, engineers, small business owners, all thanking him for showing what accountability looked like when delivered with precision, not rage. Tara stood beside him as they reviewed the press coverage. You just rewrote corporate history, she said softly. He smiled, not boastful, just reflective. No, he said. I reminded it who writes the checks. The reckoning. At 9 p.m., Elliot appeared outside his penthouse, flanked by reporters. Gone was a tale of perfection. His tie hung loose, his smile brittle. Mr. Pierce, a journalist shouted. Do you have anything to say to Mr. Langston? Elliot hesitated. Cameras flashed. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The only sound was a clicking of shutters, a public record of the moment a king fell, without ceremony. One reporter shouted the question that cut through the noise. Do you regret mocking him? Elliot looked down, face pale under the camera lights. Yes, he said quietly. More than you can imagine. The clip ran on every network by morning. The return to quiet. 2 days later, David attended a small, private dinner, not at a gala, but at a community center on the south side of the city. The air smelled of roasted chicken and floor wax, and the only cameras belonged to students recording on borrowed phones. A young boy approached him shyly. Mister, are you the man who stopped the bad people on TV? David smiled, kneeling to meet his eyes. No, he said softly. I just reminded them what good looks like. The boy grinned, proud, then ran off to join his classmates. Tara watched from a distance, her eyes soft. So this is what you built it for. David nodded slowly. Power isn't what you hold. It's what you hand down. Outside, night fell over the city, but for the first time in years, the skyline felt honest, stripped of illusion, gleaming with the kind of light that comes only after truth burns everything false away. The city didn't just wake up to a headline. It woke up to a reckoning. 3 days after the gala, New York's skyline shimmered beneath a late winter dawn, pale gold lights slicing through the fog that hung over the Hudson. Billboards that once flaunted the Aurora Foundation's emblem now glowed with new message in understated white lettering. The Langston Initiative, integrity, innovation, inclusion, no fireworks, no celebrity endorsements, just truth. The world reacts. News anchors called it the most composed act of retribution in modern corporate history. Economists called it a masterclass in silent power. Social media called it poetic justice in a tuxedo. Clips from the gala were replayed on loop. The hostess's awkward sneer, the moment the sponsorship feed switched, the silence that fell when David Langston uttered 5 words that would echo through boardrooms for years. In reality, I'm the landlord. That single line had become legend. It was quoted in newspapers, analyzed in business schools, printed on motivational posters, even turned into memes. But to David, it was never about the catchphrase. It was about the lesson, the interview aftershocks. His interview on Global Business Tonight had aired worldwide, and what followed wasn't just applause, it was accountability. Corporations began quietly re-examining their boards. HR departments scheduled new audits. Sponsorship policies were rewritten to include ethical engagement clauses. In Silicon Valley, tech founders debated a statement. Anonymity protects the individual. Visibility protects the truth. It became a mantra for a generation of professionals who'd endured invisibility under glossy slogans of diversity. Investors who once dismissed him as too quiet, too understated, now lined up to partner with him. But David refused most of them. "I'm not interested in alliances," he told Tara one afternoon as they reviewed proposals. "I'm interested in correction." The private visit. That same week, a black sedan pulled into a modest neighborhood in Detroit, the place where David's story began. He stepped out, no entourage, no cameras. Just him. The small brick house was unchanged. The same chip paint, the same rose bushes his mother had planted years ago. On the porch, a woman in her 70s stood waiting. Her posture was proud despite the years etched into her frame. "Ma," he said softly. She smiled, eyes glistening. "I saw you on TV, baby." David laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that came from deep in the chest. Relief mixed with love. He hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of the home he'd fought so hard to honor. "They finally saw you," she whispered. "Took them long enough." He pulled back slightly, looking at her. "They saw more than me. They saw themselves." She nodded, running a gentle hand down his cheek. "Your grandfather would have been proud. You did it the right way. No yelling, no showing off. You let your work speak." David swallowed hard, emotion tightening his voice. "He taught me to listen before I fix things. I just applied that to people." She smiled through tears. "And look at what you fixed." The confrontation that never made the news. 2 weeks later, David was invited to the Global Business Ethics Forum, where world leaders and CEOs gathered to discuss transparency in leadership. Cameras crowded the red carpet, but David walked straight past them, expression calm, focused. Inside, seated in the front row, was Elliot Pierce. He looked older, maybe 10 years older than 2 weeks should allow. His tan had faded, his posture collapsed. The gleam in his eyes had been replaced with quiet humiliation. The once dominant figure, who had mocked others, now struggled to be noticed. When David entered, Elliot rose instinctively, as if before royalty. Their eyes met. For a long moment, the room froze. Elliot spoke first, voice low, cracked. "David, I wanted to." David raised a hand gently. "You don't need to." Elliot blinked. "I owe you an apology." "You owe yourself reflection," David said softly. "Apologies fix optics. Reflection fixes behavior." Elliot's lips trembled. "I lost everything." David studied him quietly, then replied, "You didn't lose anything you earned. You just lost what others mistook for yours." He didn't say it with malice. It was truth, the kind of truth that lands heavier than anger ever could. Elliot nodded, eyes wet, then turned away. Cameras caught the exchange, but no one heard the words. They didn't need to. The body language said enough. Humility, recognition, and quiet absolution. The rebuilding. Months passed. The Langston Initiative became the fastest-growing philanthropic organization in North America, funding minority-owned startups, STEM scholarships, and tech access in low-income schools. One evening, Tara found David in the glass-walled headquarters, standing before a wall of photos. Children in robotics labs, young entrepreneurs pitching ideas, families attending community workshops. She stepped beside him. "You know, this all started because they wouldn't let you in the front door." David smiled faintly. "And now we're building new doors." He glanced at a photograph of a young woman soldering circuit boards, her face lit by determination. "When I was her age, nobody in that world looked like me. That changes now." Tara looked at him, voice soft. "Do you ever miss anonymity?" He considered it. "Sometimes. But then I remember. Anonymity was a cage they built to keep me unseen. Visibility is how I set others free." The closure. 6 months later, a quiet ceremony was held at the Langston Innovation Campus, built on what used to be one of Pierce Group's research sites. Hundreds gathered, students, engineers, community leaders. No red carpet, no luxury cars, just people, purpose, and presence. As David walked on a modest stage, the crowd rose in applause that felt different, not performative, not polite, but earned. He stood at the podium, letting the sound wash over him. When it quieted, he began. "6 months ago, I walked into a room full of people who thought they owned a narrative. They saw skin before substance, presence before position. And I realized something. Sometimes you can't change a room until you let it collapse under its own weight." He paused, scanning the crowd, faces from every background, every age. "We didn't just build a foundation here," he continued. "We built a reminder. That respect isn't granted by status, and dignity isn't something you perform. It's who you are when the cameras turn away." The audience erupted into applause, not for fall of arrogance, but for the rise of truth. The final scene. Later that night, the building stood empty. The lights dimmed one by one, leaving only the soft glow from David's office window. He sat alone, staring at the city skyline, the same skyline that once mocked it with its glass towers and closed doors. Now it shimmered differently. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver cufflink, the one he'd worn the night of the gala. He turned it over in his hand, the engraved initials catching the moonlight. LGH. Setting it on his desk, he whispered to himself, "Grandfather, it's fixed." Outside, a gust of wind swept across the city, carrying the hum of traffic and the faint echo of something larger than victory, balance. Because justice, when done right, doesn't roar. It resonates. And in that quiet resonance, David Langston, the man they mocked, the man who rebuilt the world's idea of respect, finally allowed himself to smile. If you like this story, please subscribe to support this channel.